Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I founded an eco-conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, I don't just make pottery, I make resources such as books and courses for other potters who want to be more eco-conscious in their pottery practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about me sharing everything I've learned with you, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go! Hello, so before we get on with the episode, I wanted to tell you about two completely free guides that I've made just for you about pottery. And the first guide is called How to Make a Pottery Glaze. So if you've ever been curious about how to make your own pottery glaze, this guide will show you exactly how to make your own glaze from start to finish. It tells you all the ingredients you need. It tells you step by step how to make the glaze, how to stay safe when glaze making, and it's got a stoneware glaze recipe in there. And if you've been curious about how to fire pottery, I have also made a guide on electric kiln firing. So this guide will tell you all the different terms that's used in like kiln firing, and what they mean, and it also takes you through the exact firing schedule that I use to do my bisque firing and also stoneware glaze firing. So it's got all the temperatures in there, all the timings in there, and both of these guides are available from the Oxford Clay website at www.oxfordclay.co.uk/resources for potters. Okay, let's get on with the episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. Just going to sit a bit closer to the microphone. I realised that some of the sound issues I've sort of had at the beginning of the podcast were literally just because I was sitting a bit far away from the microphone. So here's a revolutionary idea, sitting a bit closer. So on today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about 5 ways of recycling in pottery, because you might think that pottery is all about, using kind of like raw materials and then, create it into a pot and, it's fired and there you go, you've alchemized this incredible pot from these raw materials. But there are actually several ways of recycling materials in pottery that I thought, let's talk about on the pottery podcast, especially because, this pottery podcast has a kind of eco-conscious slant to it. So, right, let's just get into it. So I've thought of 5 ways that I've actually recycled in pottery, and you can recycle in pottery, and these are open to like any potter at any stage of their pottery journey. So the first thing is that recycling water. Okay, so this is a really fundamental thing to do in pottery, and there's 2 ways that I recycle water in my pottery practice. So the first way is I actually recycle rainwater by collecting it from the roof and then using it in my pottery practice. So I collect it in a water butt. It's just very simple mechanism, just goes down the gutter into a water butt, and I store it there, and then I use that water for making slip, because rainwater is meant to be good for making slip, better than tap water. That's what I read in a book once. So I use it for making my slip, and then I also use it for washing stuff generally. So I basically just get a bucket. I don't have a sink, when I'm making pottery, I don't have access to a sink in where I'm making pottery in the pottery studio. So I basically just fill up a bucket of rainwater, and then I use it to wash all my things in, wash my hands in and wash my tools in throughout my, when I'm making the pottery. So I use rainwater, recycle rainwater. And then the second way is that I actually recycle that water that I've used already. I recycle it into fresh water again. So you can do this thing, which I guess I just called the bucket technique. I'm not sure if that's actually the official name for this technique, but I let the clay settle in the bucket, and what happens is you get this layer of clay on the bottom, which you can which you can, you know, recycle, which we'll come on to next. But you on the top of the clay, you get this like fresh water. So you can actually pour off the water. If you let clay separate into fresh water and clay at the bottom, you know, so it might take like a few hours or overnight or something, you can pour off the top and it'll be fresh water again. So you can pour off the top water into another bucket and use it all over again. And like I said, you know, you're recycling that clay at the bottom as well. So that brings us on neatly to the next thing that you can recycle in pottery, which is clay. So clay is infinitely recyclable, which is just amazing. It's just amazing, such an amazing substance. So you can keep on wetting it, using it, drying it, re-wetting it, you know, reclaiming it. So yeah, the way I do this in my pottery practice is that I have a big bucket and any scraps I just put in the bucket. And then so the official way of doing this is you've got to dry out the clay and then you add water and then it does this thing called slaking down. And that's a way of kind of making the clay really even. So I actually have to confess that what I do quite often is I just chuck it all in, chuck it all in this bucket, wet clay, dry clay, clay with water, you know, watery clay, and I just chuck it all in this bucket. And then I try and as frequently as possible reclaim that clay, because that's a top tip with reclaiming clay is do it kind of like often, because sometimes you're just, you know, if you've got this massive bucket of clay, you're like, oh no, I've got to reclaim it now, you know, and it can take quite a long time to dry and stuff. So doing it in little batches just makes it much more manageable. What I do is I literally just put it out. You can use a plaster bat, some pottery, you know, you might have seen that in like a pottery studio, like an educational setting or something. I used to have these big plaster bats where I learned pottery, where they just used to put the reclaimed clay out on the kind of clay sludge to dry. But I just use like a piece of wood basically, and I just put the clay on a piece of wood and then just wait until it's dry enough to then wedge back into wet clay. And there we go, it's recycled clay. So yeah, so that's the next thing that you can recycle in pottery is clay. Okay, so then the third thing that you can recycle in pottery is metals. So this might seem really like, what? Wait, what? But you can actually recycle iron and copper into oxides that you can use to colour your pottery. So if this is the first you've heard of this, say like, you know, you just switched on this episode and this is the first you've heard of it, I'll just to give you a little bit of background. You can actually use the kind of natural oxidization process of copper and iron. So iron goes to rust and copper goes to this substance called verdigris, which is a green pigment, and rust is a kind of, you know, orangey brown pigment. And you can use both of those pigments to colour your pottery, which is just amazing. So you can take a piece of metal. So I use, for example, electrical wire. You can take a piece of metal, so copper, electrical wire, that's what I make my verdigris from. And I artificially oxidize it with some vinegar, a bit of salt, and I spray that, and then I spray that on, sort of like a solution. I wait for it to dry and oxidize over a few days, and then I crumble it off using my FFP3 face mask. I crumble it off, and then I use that as a pigment in my pottery. So, you know, like the same goes for rust. You can use it, you can kind of, you know, crush it into more of a powder if it's kind of more like flakes, you know, rust flakes. And then you can literally use it like you would to a commercial metal oxide. You can just use it, you know, mix it with a bit of water, paint it on your pottery, you know, as a colorant. You can use it, you can even use it in glazes. I've used verdigris successfully in some glazes that I've been testing recently. So yeah, that's another thing that you can recycle in pottery. You can recycle metals, scrap metal, back into their oxidized form to then colour your pottery, which is just so cool. I don't think I'll ever stop being like, oh, this is so cool. Like, you know, making your own metal oxides, just so cool. So, okay, another thing to say, another thing you can recycle, so recycling thing number 4 is that you can recycle ash into a pottery glaze. So if you have access to ash, which is like a waste product, say for example, you know someone who uses like a wood burning stove or something to heat their home, or, you know, you can, from a bonfire or something they've had, you know, where they've burned wood or plant material, you can recycle that ash, which is left over from burning plants, burning wood, into a pottery glaze. So the glaze, for example, that I use, the glaze on my work, is 40 parts ash, 40 parts Cornish stone, and then 20 parts quartz. So those three ingredients plus water makes this beautiful glaze. So yeah, I've got actually a whole book on using plant ash glazes. If you're interested to learn more about ash glazing, there's loads of stuff that's been written about it. Ash glazing is a really ancient practice. It's a really cool way to glaze your pottery. It often has kind of unintended like color consequences. You just with the natural minerals and trace metals in the ash already, it often makes kind of these really interesting kind of glaze surfaces, glaze colors. So it's a really interesting way of glazing your work. So if you're interested to learn more, there's a book on the Oxford Clay website on plant ash glazing. You can also get it from Amazon as well if you want a paper copy of the book. So yeah, that's a fourth thing you can recycle into pottery, just ash. Wood ash, plant ash, any plant you can make into an ash, and any ash you can use in a pottery glaze. And then the fifth and final thing that you can recycle in pottery is glass. So I've been experimenting quite a lot recently with just glass I found on the road. Which you can find just out and about, so maybe someone's accidentally smashed a bottle or something like that. Obviously, I'm very careful, and I, don't just be really careful of those like sharp edges and stuff. But I've been taking home bits of glass I've just found out and about. I've been crushing it into a powder, which I would seriously advise you to wear an FFP3 face mask for that bit. And also, if you're crushing glass, you need to be wearing like safety equipment, gloves, goggles to protect your eyes. Also, I cover the pestle and mortar. I use a stone pestle and mortar, and I also cover it with a tea towel. But you can actually if you crush glass into a powder, again, just going to say, really caution, don't breathe in that glass. Just wear all the proper safety equipment like FFP3 face mask, gloves, eye protection. Then you can actually just put that powdered glass into designs in your pottery. So you can just, smooth it into, don't touch it, but I'm reluctant to say brush it because I don't want it to go into the kind of atmosphere. But if you can kind of somehow get it into like a depressed design you've got, or some lettering you've pressed into a pot or something like that, it's a great way of adding colour to your work, adding kind of a different texture to your work. You can get beautiful glass that's already coloured. So you're recycling that colour, you're recycling, that pigment, you're recycling the glass into your work. So you can use, say like blue glass or something, green glass, brown glass. You can recycle all of these into your pottery. So that's one way of using glass. You can brush it into lettering, something that's depressed, a kind of depressed design. Another way of using it is literally just to put a piece of glass into a pot and then just firing it in a kiln. So you can do this with say like a broken piece of glass, just putting it in the bottom of a pot, and then during the firing process, that glass will melt and create a kind of base of your pot with glass. Just a word of caution as well, sometimes the glass will craze during the cooling process, and you can actually get little shards of glass coming off. So I would say only use glass decoratively, and also just be really careful when you're using glass in a way where you've got quite a lot of glass. It can little bits can break off and stuff. So, but it is such a beautiful thing to mix with glaze. If you've glazed the outside, you've got glass in the bottom, you can get some just lovely effects with glass and glaze in pottery. And it's free if you find it on the road. So so those are the 5 things you can recycle in pottery. Some of them you may have heard of, some of them might be new, but let's just go through them again quickly, just a quick recap. So we've got recycling water. So you can recycle rainwater, or just keep on recycling the water that you've got, could be rainwater, but using that bucket technique. Recycling clay, so reclaiming clay, is something is really good to do. It's it will just make your clay go so much further. You can just keep on recycling that clay. If you make mistakes, you can just recycle it again. It's absolutely amazing. So you keep on doing that until it's bisque fired. You can recycle metal such as copper and iron back into oxides that you can use to colour your work. Amazing. You can recycle plant ash, wood ash, any ash from a fire, that's burned wood or plants into a pottery glaze to glaze your work. And you can recycle glass. That's the fifth thing. So you can recycle glass either, to colour your pottery or just, create a sort of decorative effect in your pottery, in the bottom of pots or in lettering or something. It's been so nice to talk to you about the 5 things that you can recycle in your pottery. So I hope that's given you some ideas, cool ideas. And thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been really nice talking to you about 5 things to recycle in your pottery. And I'll see you on the next episode. And until then, I'm wishing you very, very happy potting, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me for the Oxford Clay Pottery podcast. If you're interested in learning more about Oxford Clay or eco-conscious pottery, there's so much for you on the Oxford Clay website. There's books, e-courses, there's a blog on there, loads of other podcast episodes, and I can't wait to share it with you. The web address is oxfordclay.co.uk. I'll see you over there.